So you were telling us a little bit earlier about Arthur D. Little's involvement with the creation of the Operations Research Society of America, how there were offices there, and also about how the head of a National Research Council committee on OR that existed before ORSA, Horace Levinson, was a consultant for your company.
Well, Phil Morris at MIT was a friend and consultant to the early operations research group at Little's. And George Kimball, I think in those days was still at Columbia, but actively consulting with us. And they were at least two of the people who were part of the core group that thought we should form an operations research society, a professional society. Jack Latham was in our group, and Jack undertook to serve as the secretary for this first little organizing group, so that it was in our offices that a lot of the work was done to prepare for the Crotonville meeting where the society was initially formed. And several of us from the group were part of that initial organization meeting. So we had a very active role in the formation of the society and continued to be active for many years afterwards. You mentioned Horace Levinson. Horace was a very interesting man. He was, I believe, a professor of astronomy at Princeton who left to go to work for Bamberger's department store in Newark, really to do work that was operations research on the activities of the store.
Before operations research really existed.
Well, it existed. He was doing it. But he just didn't call it that. Right. And one of his pupils at, or graduate students at Princeton was Arthur Brown. And Arthur Brown followed him to Bamberger's, and they worked on all kinds of issues there. And then when the war broke out and the OEG was formed, Arthur was recruited to go to OEG, or I guess it was the Operations Research Group first. But later, Horace served as a consultant at Little's, and he was very interesting man. He smoked Egyptian cigarettes, very strong. My boss at the time, Harry Wisman, very nice fellow, but he could not, for physical reasons, he could not stand cigarette smoke. But Horace would come visit, and he would drop into Harry's office, close the door, and proceed to give Harry his advice. After a while, Harry would burst out, the smoke coming out behind him, and ask if somebody else wouldn't please talk to Horace for a while. Horace became interested, among other things, in dowsing. Horace was a friend of Kenneth Roberts, the novelist, who had written a book about a dowser in Maine. And Horace wanted to run a field experiment to see whether this guy really was really what he claimed to be. Arthur Brown was at the experiment. He said it started out in a very focused way, but over the course of the afternoon and evening, it tended to deteriorate substantially. So they were not quite sure whatever Horace was able to prove.
What exactly was this? Dowsing?
Dowsing. Do you know what dowsing is?
I don't.
Dowsing is using, I guess, something like a willow stick.
Oh, a divining rod.
A divining rod to find water. Horace had a brother, Ronald Levinson, who was a philosopher at the University of Maine, and in fact, that's how Arthur Brown got to Princeton because Arthur was a student of Ronald Levinson's at the University of Maine. And he wanted to know whether, if the dowser could dowse, how far could he be effective? Particular philosophical question. And so he asked the dowser, is there water on the moon? A typical, you know. And the dowser's answer is, yes, 12 feet under the surface. And something that, like a lot of philosophical questions, could never be answered.